The screech of twisted metal echoed through the mining station's corridors as Commander Kiravos dragged herself behind an overturned cargo container. Her pale blue skin, normally luminous with Velari vitality, had dulled to the color of winter. Sky, crimson curls, once perfectly braided in military precision, now hung loose and matted with dust and dried blood. Her bioforged armor, pride of the Velari fleet, hung in sparking tatters around her lean frame. She pressed her back against the cold metal, feeling the vibrations of approaching harvester drones through the station's superstructure. The mechanical whine of their repulsor engines grew louder with each passing second. Her two hands trembling slightly from blood loss checked, her remaining weapons empty. The plasma blades that had carved through a dozen enemies lay powerless at her sides, their energy cells completely drained. Squad 7 is gone, she thought, the faces of her fallen comrades flashing before her amber eyes. Velthar with his infectious laugh. Silent Nyxra, who spoke only with her blades. Young Kethvor on his first deep space mission. All dead because of faulty intelligence and a perfectly orchestrated ambush. Kiravos closed her eyes and began the ritual of final honor, the ancient Velari prayer, spoken before death in battle. Her lips moved silently, each word a promise to join her ancestors with dignity intact. She would not run. She would not hide. When the drones found her, she would meet them standing 3 levels below. Jackson Hayes cursed as another piece of debris shifted under his feet. The human mechanic was lean and wiry, built for crawling through tight spaces and working with delicate machinery. His calloused hands sorted through the wreckage of his transport ship with practiced efficiency, searching for anything that might help him repair his emergency beacon. Come on, he muttered, beard stubbled with 3 days of grime. His brown hair was streaked with hydraulic fluid and metal shavings. Just need 1 intact transmitter array. That's all. The Vagrant's dream had been his home for 5 years, hauling cargo and fixing equipment across the outer rim. Now she was scattered across 2 levels of this abandoned mining station, victim of the same attack that had apparently hit everyone else in the system. He'd been unconscious for hours after the crash, waking to find the station eerily quiet except for the distant sounds of mechanical movement. Jackson's trained ear picked up the subtle whine of drone engines above him. His blood chilled. Harvester. Drones didn't take prisoners. They collected resources, metal, technology, and biomatter with ruthless efficiency. He'd seen the aftermath of their raids on frontier colonies. Nothing left but scoured ground and twisted metal. He grabbed his toolkit and headed for the maintenance shafts, hoping to find a better hiding spot. The drones hadn't detected him yet, but it was only a matter of time. As he climbed through the station's bowels, following half-remembered schematics, he heard something that made him freeze. Singing. A voice, alien but unmistakably female, echoing through the ventilation system. The melody was haunting, unfamiliar, but carried the weight of ritual and resignation. Someone else was alive in this metal tomb. Jackson made a decision that went against every survival instinct he'd honed during years of flying solo through hostile space. Instead of finding a place to hide, he began climbing toward the sound. His 2 hands found purchase on maintenance ladders, pulling his lean frame upward through the maze of ducts and corridors. The singing grew clearer as he approached. Words in a language he didn't recognize, but the meaning was clear enough. This was a death song. When Jackson finally emerged from a damaged air vent 3 levels up, he saw her. The alien warrior knelt behind makeshift cover, her pale blue skin almost ethereal in the emergency lighting. Her red hair caught the light like flame, and even wounded and surrounded, she radiated a fierce dignity that took his breath away. The harvester drones were closing in from 3 directions, their sensors painting targeting lasers across the debris field. She had maybe 2 minutes before they converged on her position. Jackson Hayes had always been good at fixing things. It was time to see if he could fix this. Without thinking twice, he dropped from the vent and sprinted toward her. Position, his mind already cataloging the scattered equipment and wreckage around them. If they were going to die here, at least they wouldn't die alone. Kiravos spun at the sound of approaching footsteps, her warrior instincts overriding her death meditation. Her amber eyes widened as she saw the human running toward her, not away from the approaching drones, but directly into the kill zone. His brown hair was wild, his clothes torn and stained with machine oil, but his eyes held a determined fire that reminded her of her fallen squad mates. "Are you insane?" she hissed in accented standard as he dove behind her makeshift barricade. "The harvesters will be here in moments. You should run while you still can." Jackson's hands were already moving, pulling tools from his kit as he surveyed their defensive position. "Yeah, well, running's never been my strong suit," he panted, his gaze taking in her injuries with obvious concern. "Besides, looks like you could use an engineer." The first drone rounded the corner, its optical sensors sweeping the area with mechanical precision. Kiravos tensed, preparing to charge it with her bare hands if necessary, but Jackson grabbed her arm the first time a male had dared touch her without permission in years. "Wait," he whispered, pulling a device from the wreckage. "I've got a better idea." The improvised electromagnetic pulse burst from the salvaged power cell, sending the lead drone tumbling to the ground in a shower of sparks. Two more appeared. Immediately, adaptive programming already compensating for the attack. Jackson was ready with a second device, a jury-rigged plasma cutter that sliced through the nearest drone's central processor. "Impressive," Kiravos admitted, a note of respect creeping into her voice. "But there are dozens more coming. We need weapons, not tricks." "Then we make weapons," Jackson replied, gesturing to the debris field around them. "Your armor, the neural interface, is still intact, right? The power coupling may be fried, but if I can reroute the main feeds..." Kiravos stared at him. "You understand Villari biotech?" "I understand systems," he said simply, already pulling components from nearby wreckage. "Energy flows, processing cores, feedback loops, the basic principles are universal. Help me strip these drone power cells." Despite every protocol screaming against cooperating with an unknown alien, Kiravos found herself working alongside the human. His hands moved with surprising delicacy as he sorted through components, and she noticed the way he instinctively shielded her when debris shifted dangerously overhead. There was something oddly protective about his proximity that both unsettled and comforted her. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as they worked, her pale blue fingers brushing against his calloused human ones as they reached for the same component. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system, not unpleasant, but completely foreign to her combat-focused upbringing. Jackson paused, meeting her amber gaze directly. "Because leaving someone to die alone isn't who I want to be," he said quietly. "Even if we don't make it out of here, at least we tried." The honesty in his voice struck something deep in Kiravos's warrior heart. She had spent her entire adult life surrounded by soldiers who spoke of honor and duty, but this stranger spoke of simple human decency with more conviction than any military oath. "You're bleeding," she observed, noticing the gash across his forearm where shrapnel had caught him during his desperate sprint to reach her. "It's nothing," Jackson dismissed, but she was already tearing fabric from her damaged uniform. "Hold still," she commanded, her voice softer than before. As she wrapped the makeshift bandage around his arm, their eyes met again. This close, she could see flecks of green in his brown irises, could smell the mixture of metal and human sweat that was somehow not unpleasant. "Thank you," he said, and she realized it had been years since anyone had thanked her for an act of care rather than an act of violence. The moment was shattered by the sound of more drones approaching. Jackson grabbed an armload of components and gestured toward a partially collapsed section of the station. Their better defensive position and more cover to work with. As they moved, Kiravos found herself watching the way Jackson moved, not with a warrior's predatory grace, but with the economy of motion that came from years of working in cramped spaces and dangerous environments. When falling debris threatened to block their path, he was there with a plasma cutter. When her injured leg nearly gave out, his steadying hand was immediate and sure. "Here," he said, helping her settle behind a massive piece of hull plating. "Give me 10 minutes with your armor's neural core and whatever components we can salvage. I think I can jury-rig something that'll at least get your defensive systems online." Kiravos looked at the scattered wreckage around them, then at the determined human who had chosen certain death to stand beside her. For the first time since her squad had fallen, she felt something she had thought lost forever about hope. 10 minutes, she agreed, her hand briefly covering his. "But when the drones come, we face them together." Jackson squeezed her fingers gently another, first in her regimented military life, and smiled with the confidence of someone who had spent years making impossible repairs work. "Together it is." As he began sorting through components with renewed purpose, Kiravos realized that perhaps the most important thing he was repairing wasn't her armor at all. The hull plating rang like a bell as drone energy blasts hammered their position. Jackson's hands moved with desperate precision, connecting jury-rigged power conduits to Kiravos' damaged armor while she returned fire with a plasma rifle he'd cobbled together from spare parts and determination. "How much longer?" she called over the din of battle, her voice strained but steady. The makeshift weapon in her hands was crude compared to her usual equipment, but she wielded it with deadly efficiency. "Almost there," Jackson muttered, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked. The neural interface crown of her armor lay partially disassembled before him, its bioorganic components glowing faintly as he integrated them with human-made power cells and harvester drone processors. "The systems are fighting each other, but I think a massive explosion rocked their position as a heavy assault drone's cannon found their cover." Kiravos was thrown backward, her pale blue skin scraped raw against twisted metal. Without hesitation, Jackson threw himself over her, shielding her from the rain of debris with his own body. For a moment, they lay pressed together, his chest against hers, both breathing hard. She could feel his heart hammering against her ribs, could see the determination burning in his eyes, even as blood trickled from a fresh cut on his cheek. "You're protecting me," she said, wonder coloring her voice. "In Velari culture, it should. Be the warrior who—" "Forget culture," Jackson interrupted, his face inches from hers. "Right now, we're just two people trying to survive." Their eyes locked, and Kiravos felt something shift inside her chest, something that had nothing to do with her warrior training or her military conditioning. When his hand came up to brush dust from her cheek, she didn't pull away. When her own hand found the back of his neck, drawing him closer, he didn't resist. The kiss was brief but electric, a moment of connection amid the chaos of battle. When they broke apart, both were breathing harder than the combat alone could explain. "The armor," Jackson said reluctantly, but his hand lingered on her face. "I need to finish." Another blast, closer this time. They could hear the metallic scrape of drone legs on the deck plating, drawing nearer. Jackson forced himself to turn. Back to his work, but now Kiravos positioned herself to guard both him and the armor components, her movements more protective than purely tactical. "Tell me about Earth," she said as she fired, needing to hear his voice to stay grounded. "What was it like?" "Crowded," Jackson replied, his hands never stopping their intricate work. "Millions of people, but somehow I always felt alone. That's why I took to the stars. Figured if I was going to be lonely, might as well see the galaxy while I was at it. And now?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Jackson paused, a power coupling halfway connected. Now I'm not sure I remember what lonely feels like. The admission hung between them, more intimate than their kiss. Kiravas felt heat rise in her cheeks, an embarrassing display of emotion that would have earned punishment in her military academy. Neither do I, she whispered. A new sound cut through their moment, the distinctive whine of a Harvester Prime unit, 3 times the size of the scout drones they'd been fighting. Through gaps in their cover, they could see its bulk approaching, weapon systems charging with ominous purpose. Jackson, Kiravas said quietly, I know. His voice was tight with concentration. 30 more seconds. Maybe 20 if I bypass the safety protocols. Do it. It could overload, could kill you. Kiravas looked at him, this strange, wonderful human who had chosen to stand beside her against impossible odds. Better to die trying than to die hiding. Jackson's hands flew over the final connections. Sparks erupted from jury-rigged interfaces, as incompatible technologies were forced to work in harmony. The neural crown flickered, wavered, and suddenly blazed with brilliant light. Now, he shouted. Kiravas grabbed the crown and pressed it against her temples. The sensation was unlike anything she'd ever experienced, not the smooth integration of proper Velari biotech, but something raw and powerful and alive. Energy coursed through her damaged armor, awakening systems that had been dark for hours. But it was more than just power. Somehow, impossibly, she could feel Jackson's presence. In the neural link, his determination, his care for her, his absolute refusal to give up. The patchwork armor responded not just to her commands, but to their shared will. The prime unit rounded their cover just as Kiravas rose to meet it, wreathed in crackling energy and burning with purpose. Her makeshift armor plates sparked and glowed, but held firm as she charged the massive drone. Behind her, Jackson grabbed his own improvised weapons, following her into battle. They moved as one, each anticipating the other's actions with uncanny precision. When she stumbled, he was there to steady her. When his weapon overheated, she was there to cover him. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. The prime unit fell to their combined assault, its massive frame crashing to the deck in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. In the sudden silence that followed, Kiravas and Jackson found themselves standing together amid the wreckage, both breathing hard, both alive. We did it, Jackson said, disbelief evident in his voice. Kiravas turned to face him, her pale blue, skin flushed with exertion and something deeper. The hybrid armor hummed around her, but she only had eyes for the human who had made it all possible. We did, she agreed, and reached for him again. In the aftermath of battle, the mining station fell eerily quiet, except for the soft hum of Kiravas, jury-rigged armor systems, and the distant settling of twisted metal. She and Jackson stood surrounded by the wreckage of defeated drones, both breathing heavily, both fully aware of how close they had come to death. The neural link, Kiravas said, her voice filled with wonder as she touched the crown still glowing softly at her temples. I can still feel traces of your thoughts. How is that possible? Jackson wiped sweat and grime from his face, leaving clean streaks across his stubbled cheek. I had to integrate some of my ship's bioneural processors with your armor's organic components. Maybe they're still synchronized. He paused, studying her with curiosity and something deeper. What does it feel like? Like I'm not alone in my own mind for the first time in years, she admitted, then caught herself. Such vulnerability would have been unthinkable with her Velari comrades. I mean, I know what you meant. Jackson stepped closer, his eyes warm. With understanding, I feel it too, like an echo of who you are. The strange intimacy of their shared neural connection hung between them, more personal than touch, more binding than words. Kiravos found herself studying his face, the way his brown eyes crinkled when he concentrated, the careful gentleness of his calloused hands, the stubborn set of his jaw that had driven him to risk his life for a stranger. "We should check the perimeter," she said, her military training reasserting itself. "Make sure there are no more drones." They moved through the station together, but their patrol had a different quality now. Where before they had been two individuals forced into alliance by circumstance, now they moved as a unit. Jackson instinctively covered her blind spots while she took point on the more dangerous passages. When they found a secure observation deck overlooking the debris field, they both stopped simultaneously. "Clear," Kiravos reported, then realized. Jackson was staring at her. "What?" "You're beautiful," he said simply. "I mean, I noticed before, but now, seeing you fight, seeing who you really are beneath all that military conditioning." He trailed off, color rising in his cheeks. Kiravos felt heat bloom across her pale blue skin. In Velari society, physical appearance was secondary to combat. Prowess and tactical skill. No one had ever called her beautiful, and meant it the way Jackson did. "Your culture doesn't prepare you for honesty like that," she said, moving closer to him. "We're taught to keep our emotions contained, our desires disciplined." "And what do you desire?" Jackson asked quietly, instead of answering with words. Kiravos reached up and began unfastening the neural crown. The hybrid armor powered down, leaving her in the torn remnants of her undersuit. She set the crown aside carefully, then looked at Jackson with eyes that held no trace of military reserve. "You," she said, "I desire you." Their second kiss was nothing like the desperate connection they'd shared in battle. This was slow, exploratory, filled with wonder at their differences and similarities. Jackson's hands tangled in her red curls, while hers traced the muscles of his back through his torn shirt. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing harder than their exertions had warranted. "Here?" Jackson asked, glancing around the observation deck with its panoramic view of stars and wreckage. "Velari made for life," Kiravos said, her voice husky with desire and vulnerability. "We choose our partners based on compatibility in battle, shared values, mutual respect. I've never felt what I feel with you, Jackson Hayes. I don't want to wait for someplace more convenient." Jackson cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the delicate bone structure beneath her alien features. "Are you sure?" "I'm not exactly warrior material." "You're wrong," she said, beginning to unfasten his shirt with hands that trembled slightly. "You've got the heart of a warrior. You just fight different battles." They came together with a passion born of shared danger and deeper connection, their love-making tender and fierce by turns. Jackson worshipped her pale blue skin with reverent touches while she explored the planes and angles of his human form with growing wonder. The neural link echoed faintly between them, allowing each to feel shadows of the other's pleasure and need. Afterward, they lay entwined on Jackson's salvaged emergency blanket, her red curls spread across his chest like flames against his tanned skin. The hybrid armor sat nearby, a reminder of what they had built together and what they had survived. "Tell me about Velar Prime," Jackson said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "What was your life like before all this?" Kiravos was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes distant. "Structured, disciplined, every day planned from childhood to serve the fleet. I was bred to be a perfect soldier. No personal attachments, no individual desires, just duty and honor and the good of the collective. Sounds lonely. It was. But I didn't know it until—" She turned to look at him. "Until I met someone who chose to stand beside me instead of being ordered to." Jackson tightened his arms around her. "What happens when rescue ships arrive? I'm guessing your fleet won't be thrilled about you taking up with a random human mechanic." The question they had both been avoiding hung between them now, unavoidable, and heavy with implication. Kiravas sat up, pulling the blanket around herself as she stared out at the stars. Velari military law is clear about fraternization with alien species, she said quietly, especially humans. Our two peoples have been at peace, but barely. There are those who still see humans as inferior, unworthy of genetic mixing. And you? Jackson asked, though he suspected he already knew her answer. Kiravas turned back to him, her eyes blazing with the same determination that had driven her to fight impossible odds. I think they're about to learn that this particular Velari doesn't follow orders as well as they thought. Jackson sat up and pulled her close, burying his face in her fragrant hair. Outside, the first lights of approaching ships began to appear. Among the stars, but for now, they had each other and the choice they were about to make together. The rescue ships arrived with the slow majesty of deep space vessels, 3 Velari destroyers in perfect formation, their biohull surfaces rippling with organic patterns that spoke of military precision and barely contained power. Behind them came a battered human freighter, its jury-rigged modifications and patched hull telling the story of a frontier trader accustomed to flying alone. Kiravas and Jackson stood on the observation deck, fully dressed now, but still close. Enough to touch. The hybrid armor sat between them, a testament to what they had built together and a symbol of the choice they were about to make. Commander Kiravas, came the formal transmission from the lead destroyer. This is Fleet Admiral Nix Thran. Prepare for immediate extraction and debriefing. Kiravas picked up the communication device, but didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at Jackson, seeing the tension in his shoulders, the careful way. He was preparing to let her go. That's Admiral Nix Thran, she said quietly, my commanding officer. Also my gene sister, what you would call a cousin. She raised me after my parents died in the border wars. She sounds like she means business. Jackson observed, hearing the ice in the Admiral's tone even through the translation matrix. She does. Nix Thran has never approved of what she calls my excessive individualism. Finding me here with you, having done what we've done. Kiravas trailed off. Ben squared her shoulders with military precision. She'll demand I return. To the fleet immediately for disciplinary action. The human freighter's captain came on a separate channel, his voice rough with years of breathing recycled air and cheap stimulants. Jackson Hayes, you lucky bastard. We've been looking for you. For 3 days. Your insurance company's ready to write you off as dead. Not dead yet, Korvik, Jackson replied, though it was a close thing. A pause then. Who's the blue skin? Sensors are showing 2 life signs. Jackson and Kiravas exchanged a look. In that moment, they both understood that the easy part was over. Surviving the drones had been simple compared to what came next. Admiral, Kiravas said into her communicator, her voice taking on the formal cadence of military protocol. I request permission to address the fleet. A long pause then. Permission granted, Commander, but make it brief. Kiravas took a deep breath, looked once more at Jackson, then activated the wideband transmission that would carry her words to every ship in the small rescue fleet. I am Commander Kiravas, last surviving member of Scout Squadron 7. For the official record, my squad was eliminated by Harvester forces due to faulty intelligence and inadequate support. I survived through the direct intervention of human engineer Jackson Hayes, who risked his own life to provide aid to a foreign military officer with no expectation of reward or recognition. She paused, letting the formal words settle, then continued in a voice that carried new strength. However, I also address you now as Kiravas, individual citizen of the Velari Confederacy, invoking my right to speak freely under the codes of personal honor. What happened on this station was more than a military action. It was a demonstration of what our peoples can accomplish when we work together as equals, rather than maintaining the careful distance of political necessity. Through the neural link that still faintly connected them, Jackson felt her determination like a blazing star. He reached out and took her hand. Furthermore, Kiravos continued, her voice growing stronger, I formally declare my intention to resign my commission and pursue a life path that honors both my service to the Confederacy and my personal growth as an individual. I will not be returning to the fleet. The silence that followed was profound. Then Admiral Nick Strand's voice cut through space like a blade. Commander, you are emotionally compromised and speaking irrationally. Report to Destroyer Vel Terran. Immediately for medical evaluation and psychological assessment. With respect, Admiral, Kiravos replied, I decline. I am exercising my rights under the separation protocols. I formally request civilian status and transfer of my personal effects to independent custody. Another pause, then a new voice older, more weathered. This is Captain Korvak of the Lucky Strike. I don't know what you two have gotten into over there, but if you need transport, my ship's got room for passengers, for the right price. Jackson squeezed Kiravos' hand and activated his own communicator. Captain, I think we can work something out. My salvage rights on this station should more than cover passage to wherever we want to go. And where might that be? Korvak asked with barely concealed amusement. Kiravos and Jackson looked at each other, and in that moment, the future spread out before them like an uncharted star map. They had their hybrid armor, his engineering skills, her military training, and something rarer than any technology, a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine love. Wherever the work is, Jackson said finally, there are a lot of people out here who could use help fixing things that are broken, and a lot of fights worth fighting. Kiravos added, if you have the right person standing beside you. Admiral Nick Strand's final transmission was sharp with disapproval, but tinged with reluctant understanding. Commander, former Commander, your separation request is acknowledged. Your service record will reflect resignation under honorable circumstances. However, you are hereby banned from Confederacy space for a period of 10 standard years. Understood, Admiral, Kiravos replied. Thank you for everything you taught me. As the Velari destroyers began their departure burns, graceful and implacable as hunting raptors, the Lucky Strike maneuvered closer to the mining station. Captain Korvak's voice crackled over the comm. Docking Bay 3 is still functional, if you can make your way down there. And bring that fancy armor. I know some people who'd pay good money to study technology like that. Kiravos picked up the neural crown of her hybrid armor, feeling its weight both physical and symbolic. This stays with us, she said firmly. It's not for sale. Damn right it's not, Jackson agreed, shouldering his toolkit. It's proof of what we can build together. As they made their way toward the docking bay, past the wreckage of drones and the debris of their old lives, Kiravos felt lighter than she had in years. The military structure that had defined her existence was gone, but in its place was something infinitely more valuable: freedom to choose her own path and someone to walk it with. Any regrets? Jackson asked as they approached the Lucky Strike's airlock. Kiravos looked back once at the mining station where they had found each other, then forward to the stars that awaited them. Only that it took a drone attack to bring us together, she said, then smiled with a warmth that would have surprised her former commanding officers. But I suppose the best things in life are worth fighting for. Hand in hand, carrying their hybrid armor and their shared future, they stepped aboard the freighter and into the vast galaxy beyond. Behind them, the station continued its slow orbit around a distant star, a testament to what could be built when different worlds chose to trust each other. In the ship's modest passenger cabin, as the Lucky Strike engaged its jump drive and carried them toward unknown adventures, Kiravos and Jackson Hayes began planning their next chapter. They had each other, they had their skills, and they had learned the most important lesson of all, that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the marriage of different strengths, different worlds, different hearts beating in perfect harmony. The stars were waiting, and they would meet them together.